Okay, let's jump right in today. We're looking at some uh, pretty challenging ideas, maybe, but also potentially really useful ones about life, trust, human nature, stuff like that.
Yeah, and we're drawing this from material you, or listener, shared with us. It's all centered around the thinking of Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher.
Right. And the idea is to kind of unpack it all.
Exactly, to sift through these, sometimes difficult concepts and see if we can find some practical takeaways, things you can actually use.
Because maybe you brought this stuff to us because, well, you've had experiences. Felt let down, maybe trusted the wrong person, or just felt, I don't know, a bit naive sometimes, like you didn't see something coming.
It happens, and it leads to that big question, doesn't it? The one these sources kick off with, who can you really count on?
And the answer we're exploring today, coming from the Schopenhauer perspective, is...
Well, it's pretty direct.
It is, primarily.
Yourself.
Okay.
Yourself. That's quite a starting point. So let's get into the why. What was his basic take on life that leads there? Well, Schopenhauer, writing back in the 1800s, is often described as having this bitter and most realistic view of things.
Like unrealistic.
Yeah. And his core idea, as laid out here, wasn't that life is, this wonderful gift we just get to enjoy. He saw it more like forced labor, something we're kind of stuck doing.
It's forced labor. Wow. Yeah. That doesn't sound very cheerful.
No, it's definitely not optimistic in the usual sense. But the source makes an interesting point here.
What's that?
That the more someone has actually suffered in their life, the more those words, even though they sound harsh, might actually ring true.
Huh. So suffering might lead to a different kind of understanding, maybe. A more realistic one in his view.
That seems to be the idea presented here. Suffering perhaps strips away some illusions.
And that view really clashes with, the stories we often hear growing up. The source points this out. Think about cartoons where everyone's always happy, or fairy tales.
Right, like Snow White trusting everyone she meets and waiting for a prince.
Exactly. We kind of absorb this idea that the world is just full of kindness, big smiles, everyone means well.
That naive view that things are inherently good.
But then adult life happens. And the picture the source paints is different. That prince, maybe just after a nice night out.
Or the friend who seems so kind, maybe only as long as you're with them, providing something they need.
And the boss's smile. Only there as long as they profit from you. It suggests intentions can be, well, complicated, conditional.
And this leads us right into a key Schopenhauer quote highlighted in the source. It's quite something.
Lay it on me.
People are kind to each other not out of good intentions, but out of need.
Whoa, okay, kindness out of need. What does that even mean? That sounds cynical.
Well, the implication here isn't necessarily pure cynicism. It's more about awareness. The idea is that kindness often isn't just this spontaneous act of pure goodwill. There's often an underlying motivation.
On the quiet.
It could be a need for connection, for validation, maybe for something in return later, or even, some kind of benefit. So when someone's kind, this perspective suggests asking gently, internally, what might they be getting out of this?
So it's not about walking around thinking everyone's out to get you.
No, definitely not. The source is clear on that. It's not about suspicion or pessimism ruining everything. It's about avoiding being simple-minded. It's about developing awareness of how humans sometimes operate.
Okay. This awareness. And Schopenhauer himself, he gets called a pessimistic philosopher a lot.
He does. And there's this other statement from him in the source. It argues the world isn't inherently a useful or good place.
Right.
So if someone is excessively optimistic about it all, he says they're either ignorant of how things really are or delusional.
Oof. Ignorant or delusional. That sounds, a bit too harsh, maybe.
It's strong language for sure.
What's the thinking behind that? According to the source, why link optimism with ignorance or delusion?
It follows from that view of motivation we just talked about. If people are often looking out for their own benefit, if there's calculation behind the smiles sometimes,
then assuming everyone's purely good is risky.
Exactly. Believing the world is automatically set up for your happiness, or that everyone has your best interests at heart without question, that's seen as dangerous. The source puts it bluntly, if you're too gullible, trust too easily, see everything is wonderful without looking closer, you're essentially sending out an invitation letter for others to exploit that.
An invitation letter. That's a vivid image.
It is. And let's tie this back to suffering for a second. Schopenhauer saw suffering everywhere in life.
Yeah, that forced labor idea.
But the source stresses his point wasn't just life is miserable. It was that understanding this suffering, facing it, doesn't make you a victim. It actually makes you stronger, more resilient.
Okay, so it builds you up in a way.
Mhm.
And this leads to something really important. The source distinguishes being naive versus being genuinely kind. They're not the same.
Not at all. The naive person in this view thinks everyone's an angel. They just haven't seen or understood the potential for, well, less than angelic behavior.
Right.
But the genuinely kind person, they know, they understand the world can be tough, that people can be self-serving, that things go wrong. They've seen it or they get it. And despite that knowledge,
They choose kindness anyway.
exactly, they consciously choose to be good, compassionate, but, and this is key, they do it while staying aware and careful. They're not walking into traps blindly.
So Schopenhauer, through this lens, isn't saying be miserable and trust no one.
No, he's saying live with awareness. Don't be fooled by shiny surfaces. If something seems too good to be true, maybe pause, investigate.
Right. Don't just assume.
And that core idea comes back again. Nobody but yourself is going to save you.
Which sounds lonely, but you're saying the point is empowerment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understanding this isn't meant to isolate you. It's meant to ground you so you can choose better who you rely on, who you open up to, and ultimately protect yourself better.
It helps to see these ideas in action. The source gives an example, right? A story about someone named Nima.
Yeah, a specific anecdote to illustrate these points.
So Nima was head over heels in love, told his girlfriend everything. Fears, dreams, childhood stuff he'd never told anyone, past mistakes, total vulnerability. And she seemed like a great listener, totally supportive.
He felt he'd found the one he could completely open up to. Then, crisis hits, his work goes bankrupt, he's got no money for months, incredible stress, can't sleep. Rock bottom, basically.
And then what happened?
The source puts it very simply. Right at that moment, the girl left and went away. Just gone.
Wow. Just when he needed support the most.
Exactly. And Nemo was obviously crushed. His first words, according to the source, were wrestling with it. I thought if I was honest, if I told her everything, and if I completely surrendered myself to her, I could win. I could keep her. I could build my future with her.
Oh, man. That's heartbreaking.
It really is. And that's when the narrator in the source recalled that Schopenhauer saying,
Such one
whoever gets too naked shivers sooner.
gets too naked. Meaning too vulnerable, too exposed.
Precisely. Too trusting without really knowing if the other person could handle it or would stick around when things got tough.
So what's the lesson from Nima's story then? Don't trust anyone.
No, not quite. The source pulls out more nuanced lessons. Trust is good, it's necessary. But you need to understand who you're trusting.
Discernment.
Yes, and sharing your heart is good, but you have to ask, does this person really have the capacity for it? Can they handle your vulnerability? Will they value it? Especially when things aren't easy.
So it comes back to that awareness again.
And that stark warning, be careful what you tell whom. Not everyone deserves your deepest truths. It's about assessing the risk before you open up completely.
Okay, but why are we like this? Why do we often start out so naive? Why assume everyone's good, like us?
Schopenhauer had thoughts on this, mentioned in the source from his book, The Wisdom of Life. He basically said we enter life, especially in youth, with our heads full of, well, dreams and illusions.
It's like, what kind of illusion?
Thinking the world is fundamentally fair. Believing goodness always gets rewarded automatically. Expecting life to operate like some perfect moral system.
Yeah, I can see that. We want to believe those things.
Of course. But the source then asks point blank, is the world really fair or moral in that simple way?
And the answer here is...
No, it's described more like a stage. On this stage, the wolf and lamb play together. And if you can't tell who is the wolf...
You become the lamb, the prey.
Exactly. The world might be fair in the sense of cause and effect, maybe, but not moral in guaranteeing good outcomes for good intentions.
Okay, so the world can be harsh. People aren't always angels.
Yeah.
What do we do then, if we accept that reality?
Well, the source is really clear. The answer is not to become a pessimist or heartless or push everyone away. That's not the takeaway.
So what is the advice?
Schopenhauer's advice, filtered through this source, is that we have to protect our minds. We need to train our minds not to be fooled.
Protect and train. What does that look like practically?
It means applying reason. Before you fully trust someone, the source suggests evaluate the person. Look at their actions over time, not just their words.
Okay.
Before spilling your deepest secrets, maybe test the person with smaller things first. See how they handle confidentiality.
Makes sense.
And before giving your whole heart, try to see if the other person truly has the capacity for that kind of commitment and care.
It sounds like being more deliberate, more observant.
Exactly. And it all gets summed up nicely in 3 rules for living wisely, attributed here to Schopenhauer.
What are they?
Love with caution, trust with reason, and decide with experience.
Love with caution, trust with reason, decide with experience. Wow. That packs a punch.
Doesn't it? The source even muses that if teenagers learned those 3 rules, maybe a lot of youthful heartbreak could be avoided.
Yeah, learning things the hard way. Maybe this offers a different path. It's about being strong, not naive.
Right. The source makes that contrast very clear. The person who just believes everything is good. They're seen not as good, but as incapable of seeing reality, incapable of protecting themselves. And the world, this view suggests, isn't always kind to the incapable.
So, true strength isn't ignorance.
No. True strength, according to this, comes from knowing how the world is, the good, the bad, the messy, and still choosing to be good, making a conscious choice.
So, the strong person isn't cynical, but they're not easily fooled either.
Precisely. They don't get swept away by every smile or every I love you. They don't assume every helper is an angel. They manage to be kind, but not naive. Compassionate, but not foolish. They feel things, sure, but their emotions are guided by their reason. They're in the hands of their reason.
That's a powerful balance. The source uses that metaphor, right? The world is a difficult school.
It does. It's a tough place to learn. But there's a hopeful part, too.
Which is?
If you learn to look correctly, if you develop that awareness, use reason, learn from experience, you'll fall less, get hurt less deeply.
And most importantly,
you won't lose yourself. You won't swing wildly between naive optimism and bitter cynicism. You find a more stable, grounded way to be.
So looking at Schopenhauer through this material you shared,
Yeah.
It's challenging, definitely. It pushes back on easy answers. But the goal isn't cynicism.
Not at all. It's about awareness, about navigating the world with open eyes, a strong heart, and, importantly, your reason engaged.
Not just drifting along hoping for the best.
Right. And maybe the key thought to leave you with, the one the source really emphasizes at the end, is that balance. Listen to your heart, of course. Feelings matter. But listen to your mind, too. Use both. That synthesis of feeling and reason. That's where the wisdom seems to lie, according to this perspective.
Listen to your mind, too.
Yeah.
That's something to really sit with. Think about your own life, your own experiences. How does this land for you?
We hope exploring this was valuable.
Yeah, definitely gave us a lot to think about.